South Korea, a geopolitical paradox at the crossroads of prosperity and threats. South Korea, a country located next to North Korea, presents a fascinating geopolitical paradox. On one side, it is a prosperous nation with one of the world's most advanced economies, while on the other, it shares a border with a poor, isolated regime. This stark economic contrast, combined with political polarization, has created a tense relationship between the two Koreas, fraught with the constant potential for conflict. Despite facing the ever-present threat of nuclear aggression from the North, South Korea has achieved remarkable economic progress. However, the sustainability of this prosperity in the long term hinges on the sea, as South Korea's economic well-being is heavily dependent on maritime trade. To understand the challenges South Korea faces, we must first examine its fundamental vulnerabilities. Although South Korea appears on the map as a peninsula jutting out from mainland Asia, its geographical position is more akin to an island, especially when compared to North Korea, whose hermit kingdom policies have severed all meaningful interaction with the South. This isolation from the North prevents the flow of everything from cutting-edge technologies like Samsung electronics to the global wave of Korean pop culture, K-pop. As a result, South Korea faces significant logistical and transportation challenges, with the nation's reliance on the sea as a vital lifeline for international trade and communication. Geography and resources. A fragile dependence on the sea. South Korea's land geography doesn't help much either. The country is mostly mountainous, with a cold climate and dense forests that leave little room for agriculture or natural resource extraction. The country's prosperity relies heavily on the sea, which serves as the critical connection between South Korea and the world. Ironically, South Korea lacks many essential resources for survival and development. It imports most of its food, fertilizer, and a staggering 95% of its energy needs, making it one of the top 10 countries globally in terms of energy imports, including natural gas, oil, and coal. The country's economic model is built on energy imports to fuel industries, and any disruption in the global energy supply chain poses a serious risk. This raises a key question. What would happen if energy supplies were disrupted? Can the fragile cooperation among Middle Eastern countries, India, Southeast Asia, and China be enough to ensure a steady flow of energy to South Korea? In reality, this stability is fragile and easily threatened by global geopolitical and economic shifts. The North Korean threat, a constant geopolitical challenge. Adding to these external pressures is the ever-present threat from North Korea. The North's continued provocations, including nuclear tests and military demonstrations, represent a constant source of anxiety for South Korea. The presence of North Korea has created immense pressure, as the proximity of its capital to Seoul makes it an easy target in the event of a military conflict. With half of South Korea's population concentrated around the capital, a potential conflict could devastate the region in just a few hours. The nuclear threat, coupled with North Korea's military posturing, exacerbates the sense of insecurity, not only in South Korea but throughout the region. Regional relations balancing tensions with China, Japan, and the US. South Korea's geopolitical position also makes it vulnerable to the influence of other regional powers. China, South Korea's largest trading partner, holds significant sway over the nation, yet there are deep ideological and economic differences between the two countries. Meanwhile, Japan, a key military ally of South Korea, still carries the scars of their historical conflict, particularly from Japan's colonization of Korea. Despite improvements in diplomatic ties, the historical wounds, ranging from the devastation of cities to wartime atrocities, remain difficult to fully reconcile. These deep-seated tensions continue to complicate the relationship, and while these nations cooperate, the lingering historical grievances can resurface at any moment. The dynamics between South Korea, Japan, and the US can be likened to a complex triangle where each country competes for economic and military support from the US to protect crucial maritime trade routes. South Korea's dependence on the US for security is undeniable. The US provides vital defense protection through trade agreements, military aid, and the presence of around 30,000 US troops stationed in South Korea, one of the most militarized regions in the world. The US also plays a pivotal role in deterring North Korean aggression. Without the presence of the US military, South Korea would find itself dependent on the cooperation of both China and Japan to ensure the free flow of goods and energy. This would be a precarious situation fraught with uncertainty. The critical role of US protection, a lifeline for South Korea. In conclusion, South Korea's survival and continued prosperity are deeply intertwined with its alliance with the United States. This relationship is crucial not only for national security, but also for economic stability. Without access to the oceans, secure energy supplies, and food imports, South Korea's economy would collapse. As such, maintaining this strategic partnership with the US is vital to ensuring South Korea's long-term stability and success. The challenge remains: how can South Korea sustain this vital relationship and ensure economic resilience in an increasingly volatile geopolitical environment? The answers to these questions will determine whether South Korea can continue to thrive amidst the surrounding uncertainties. South Korea's remarkable economic transformation from devastation to global power in the aftermath of the Korean War and the brutal years of Japanese colonial rule, South Korea faced immense hardships. In the 1950s, it was one of the poorest nations in the world, caught in a stalemate with its northern neighbor. Yet in just a few decades, South Korea underwent an extraordinary economic transformation, rising from the ashes to become an economic powerhouse. Today, its wealth is approximately 30 times greater than that of North Korea. This remarkable journey of development raises an essential question: what fueled South Korea's meteoric rise? The answer lies in a bold economic strategy focused on export-driven growth and the development of powerful conglomerates known as Chaebols. With limited natural resources and heavy dependence on foreign aid, South Korea had no choice but to forge a path of rapid industrialization. Under the leadership of President Park Chung-hee, the country implemented an economic strategy that some critics labeled corporatism, or even a distorted version of free market capitalism. At the heart of this strategy was nurturing large, family-owned conglomerates through a range of supportive policies, including subsidies, tax breaks, low-interest loans, and special protectionist measures. The goal was not to compete in domestic markets, but to conquer international ones through exports. Initially, the focus was on heavy industries such as steel and chemicals. However, thanks to significant investments in education and the development of a highly skilled workforce, these Chaebols gradually shifted towards high-tech products, including automobiles, mobile phones, and televisions. The global success of these Chaebols brought in a massive influx of foreign currency, which played a crucial role in transforming South Korea from a poverty-stricken nation into one of the world's top 10 exporters. This rapid economic growth is often described as a miracle on the Han River, a term that captures the extraordinary nature of South Korea's transformation, the dark side of Chaebol's monopoly power and social inequality. However, the dominance of Chaebols came with significant drawbacks. Their immense power manifested in their expansion into a wide range of industries. Take Lotte, for example. Initially a gum company, Lotte expanded into diverse sectors such as food and beverages, retail, construction, chemicals, tourism, finance, entertainment, and even digital technology. While this diversification is impressive, it has led to monopolistic control over many aspects of the economy. Currently, the top chaebols contribute around 60% of South Korea's economic growth and account for approximately 80% of the country's total output. Despite employing only about 10% of the labor force, chaebols like LG, Hyundai, and Samsung remain dominant players in global markets, with Samsung alone contributing around 20% of South Korea's GDP. While this model has driven rapid growth and innovation, it has also led to serious social and economic issues. The monopoly-like control of these conglomerates has contributed to widespread corruption, labor violations, and growing income inequality. As a result, South Korean society has become increasingly divided, with the younger generation facing immense challenges. High suicide rates, dwindling social mobility, and a lack of confidence in the ability to climb the social ladder are growing concerns. Smaller companies are often squeezed out by the chaebols, and many face intellectual property theft and unfair competition. These issues pose significant challenges for South Korea's future economic sustainability and social equity. The demographic crisis, a looming national challenge. Another major issue that is contributing to South Korea's struggles is its rapidly declining birth rate. In recent years, South Korea has been facing a demographic crisis with one of the lowest birth rates in the world. By the early 2020s, the country's birth rate had plummeted to a historic low, with only about 0.8 children born per woman of childbearing age. The population of South Korea, currently about 52 million, is projected to shrink dramatically, potentially falling to just 36 million by 2050 and even further to 15 million by the end of the century. This population decline is driven by several factors, including South Korea's demanding work culture, high living costs, and a housing market that has become increasingly unaffordable for young families. The country's mountainous terrain also concentrates its population in a few urban areas, leading to fierce competition for limited space. Rapid urbanization and industrialization have resulted in a large migration from rural areas to cramped apartments in overcrowded cities. This raises the question, can young South Koreans raise children in such a stressful and confined environment? Economic pressure and the work culture. The pressure to succeed economically, combined with a relentless work culture, is another key factor influencing the country's low birth rate. South Korea's economic miracle has come at the cost of a high-stress, high-demand work environment with long hours and intense competition. This culture of overwork has contributed to mental health issues, burnout, and a general reluctance among young people to start families. As a result, the country's economic success is facing a severe demographic challenge that threatens its long-term sustainability. In addition, South Korea's hierarchical society, often marked by rigid social structures and traditional values, has created further barriers for young people trying to balance career aspirations with personal life. The resulting societal pressure makes it increasingly difficult for many individuals to prioritize family life, leading to even lower birth rates. Conclusion: the challenges ahead. South Korea's stunning economic rise is nothing short of a miracle, but it is also a story fraught with challenges. The dominance of Chaebols while driving growth has led to monopolistic practices and social inequality. At the same time, the country faces a demographic crisis that threatens to unravel its economic achievements. The future of South Korea will depend on how well it can adapt to these new realities, fostering a more inclusive economy and creating an environment where young people can thrive and feel empowered to build families. The balance between economic success and social stability will be key to South Korea's continued prosperity in the years to come. The impact of South Korea's work culture and a demographic decline on its future. In South Korea, the long working hours, client meetings after regular hours, and weekend overtime have become ingrained in the daily lives of many workers. As a result, many individuals struggle to find time for their families, with personal lives often taking a back seat to the relentless cycle of production and export. South Korea's major exports, particularly high-tech products like those from Samsung, have powered the nation's economic success. However, this drive for productivity comes at a significant cost, particularly in the context of the country's growing demographic challenges. One of the most pressing issues South Korea faces is the lack of a young workforce, which poses a serious threat to its future. While a declining youth population can create short-term challenges, the long-term consequences are even more concerning. One of the most alarming outcomes is the shortage of caregivers for the aging population. By 2060, it's predicted that 40% of South Korea's population will be elderly, leading to the highest elderly dependency ratio in the world. This aging demographic will place a heavy economic burden on the younger generations, who are already scarce in number. The demographic crisis and economic implications. South Korea is set to become a nation with a predominantly elderly population, which will put immense pressure on the younger workforce. The decreasing birth rate has long-term consequences, not only for the economy, but also for national security. As the population shrinks, there will be fewer people to contribute to the workforce, leading to economic stagnation and a potential rise in social inequality. A smaller, aging population means fewer resources available to meet essential needs, including defense, which could compromise South Korea's security. This demographic shift presents a future where the strength of the nation is weakened both economically and strategically. The economic downturn associated with a declining population is almost inevitable. As fewer young people enter the labor force, South Korea's economic output will be strained, and the country will likely become more dependent on external partners. This could further exacerbate the social inequalities that have already been amplified by the Chaebol-dominated economy. The global geopolitical challenge, South Korea's growing vulnerability. As South Korea faces these internal challenges, it will also need to navigate a rapidly changing geopolitical landscape. Although North Korea remains a constant threat, China and especially Japan will emerge as increasingly formidable competitors in the long run. Japan, the first country to experience a demographic crisis similar to South Korea's, could be the first to find solutions and recover. With a larger population and stronger naval forces, Japan could pose a significant challenge, especially in areas like global supply chains, where both nations share similar concerns. Japan's recovery from its demographic crisis could force South Korea into a position where it must cooperate regardless of its wishes. Meanwhile, South Korea's relationship with the United States, its primary ally, could be influenced by shifts in U.S. foreign policy. If the U.S. recalibrates its focus away from East Asia, South Korea may be forced to seek new partners, potentially leaving the nation isolated on the global stage. This would pose a serious threat to both its economic and national security, creating a future marked by instability and uncertainty. The path forward are navigating economic and security challenges. For South Korea, the challenges of demographic decline, an overworked society, and increasing dependence on the US and other external allies are inextricably linked. The country's economic model, heavily reliant on exports and chaebols, has driven impressive growth, but it may not be sustainable in the long term, especially as the population ages and the workforce shrinks. To secure its future, South Korea must find ways to address these demographic issues while balancing its economic and geopolitical vulnerabilities. The nation's ability to adapt, whether by finding solutions to its aging population, rethinking its work culture, or strengthening ties with new international partners, will ultimately determine its prosperity in the decades ahead. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to check out our other videos to support the channel. See you in the next video.